Welcome to Galactic Explorers with your intuitive channelers, Daniella and Dallas. Hello. Get your alternative fix. Your thought fix with the joyride through earthly, spiritual, metaphysical, scientific, and everyday topics. Explored with the galactic perspective. I can't speak today.
Nailed it.
Oh, well, anyways, let's get to it, Daniella. Let's get to it. We're going to go and we're going to pull from the bowl of magical wonderments.
Ain't nothing to it but to do it.
All right. We have a reviewer's question. Explain like I'm 5. What is exactly shadow work? That's a good question. Thank you for asking.
Well, you have 2 children.
Yes, I do.
So if you were to sit your 2 kids, well, imagine they were the same age. They had, if you were to sit your 2 down, and you have a boy and a girl, right? So you got one of each, which is great, for the explanation, right? Sake. How would you explain what shadow, not only what shadow work is, but why, especially for a kid, why they should even bother to care about it?
Ooh.
Or that it's important to do as you go get older so that you're not repeating patterns and things like that, right? So if you were a 5-year-old, like if you were explaining it to a 5-year-old, shall I say, how would that go?
All right. Give me a thought process. Let me think about this for a minute. Explain to a 5-year-old something pretty, for shadow work. This is going to take some quick mommy thinking here. What and why? So I would bring up that shadow work is kind of like Peter Pan. How he has a shadow, and that shadow follows him everywhere he goes, and has to follow him even during certain choices that Peter makes.
Right.
That shadow reflection of him also tries to steer Peter in a other direction at times when he's about to make a decision that's probably not the best.
Because of the stuff that it's holding on to from all of the previous experiences.
Right. It's part of you, right?
Right.
It knows a different way than maybe you're not thinking clearly of or seeing. Because your shadow can go, your shadows. Anyways. I'm like, you can't really simmer.
I know. That always fades out.
So, doing the best I can here.
We put you on the spot.
A little bit. That's okay. So Peter Pan has a shadow. It's another side of you. It's a reflection of yourself. And sometimes we need to listen to it because that's also part of our intuition, right? Our higher self, even, right? Because that's all connected. And that if we it's important to listen to that inner self, because if we pay attention and slow down, not get ahead of ourselves or the situation or whatever, that we can redirect ourselves.
Right.
That is for our highest good. If we go through a thinking process of like, oh wait, hold on, what would my shadow do? Right? Turn to your shadow. Where's your shadow facing? Do you need to turn the other direction and go that way instead?
Right. But in this case, it's not literal though. Because you think to a 5-year-old, they would be like, oh, so look at the direction my shadow's going.
Right. But you'd use it as an example and be like, this is just an example.
I'm just being devil's advocate here. They said explain to them like they're 5. I'm going, a 5-year-old will be like, oh, so my shadow has the answers. And they're literally just going to start talking to their shadow.
Well, then that's where you would teach your child of intuition work of, hey, ask yourself, right? Body testing and stuff like that. I do.
Right. I mean, we're right, but isn't that the shadow work itself? Is like,
yes, it is. It's turning inwards. It's like,
yeah.
I think you said it, it's going inwards, right? We're going inwards to like, what do I want? What is in my highest good? What is this serving me? And
Right.
that sounds selfish, but in a sense, you got to really go with what's best for you, because you could be making a bigger decision than you think you are.
Right. So here's the other question.
Yeah.
That's like, people have a lot of, shall we say, connotation with shadow work, that it's always painful. Like it's something that you don't want to do. It's something you don't want to actually look at or admit to, a side of yourself that you actually don't want to look at, as opposed to your intuition self.
Right.
Like
So
most people view it like a shadow, like working on your shadow self is like all the things that you don't like about yourself that you've brought along the way from various experiences and stuff. And you have to process it. And that's usually painful. So that's why people avoid it. So if you were talking to them, what might you say to sort of explain why it's a benefit to go through the aggro from your point of view?
I would say
Just go ahead and say it then. Get it out.
That dark side is not a bad side. And when you're willing to see yourself not as a bad person or making bad choices, that you were doing maybe what you thought was best at the time,
Right.
or you didn't know better, or like you could go through the process there and go, okay, where was I at that time? Right. And then also realize that you're not at that moment anymore, that you're at a different moment, but you can look back on that and go, okay, this is what happened, or this is what I did, or whatever it is. And I face it and I hold that and I see it and I acknowledge it. Thanks. But guess what? I don't got to hold on to it anymore. I don't got to look at it, You do the process clearing, right?
Right.
That's all it is. But you got to face it and you got to come to terms with yourself with it.
And that's the painful part, right?
That's the hard part. But you got to tell yourself that's not who I want to be, or that's not who I really am, or whatever the situation is on that reflection you have that we don't want to look or face or admit.
Right.
Once we do, in a different place, right? Step out of your body for a second. Look at it from another point of view. And then go, okay. But you got to come to terms with doing it with yourself. It just doesn't like, okay, I'm going to do it and just half-fast it. It's being willing to sit with it for a minute.
Yeah, it's interesting the level of fear associated with the quote unquote amount of pain and anguish that you're supposedly going to have to go through to deal with shadow work. When I find that the only thing that's in pain is your ego.
Yes.
In that sense, where it's like you're saying it's a hit sometimes to have to look at yourself in the mirror for real, for instance, and talk about like, okay, so I really like to drink maybe a little too much. There's nothing wrong with liking to drink. Don't get me wrong. I like to drink. Dallas doesn't. Does it matter? No. If you do, cool beans. If you don't, cool beans. But if you notice that you're like having an unbalanced relationship with anything,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, right? This is like the kind of topic we were just talking about actually before we
Of
got on
course.
here, oddly enough. As it always is, right? Somehow, we always somehow, like literally, it's always somehow connected to it, right? But I mean, it could even be with like food. Like we were talking about how I had like a fucking mac and cheese addiction.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like,
totally
right?
chips. Mine is chips sometimes, and I'm like, oh, can't have chips in the house for a hot minute because Mama eats
Right.
the whole freaking bag because they're so
Right.
good.
Exactly. So, but it took me going, okay, girl, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. And it's like, so you know that pasta and cheese is adding a few inches to places you don't like for it to add inches to. So if you're going to be real with yourself, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, so this is where I am based off the choices that I've been making. What can I do differently? How could I maybe even restructure the habit so that it's not so habit so it's not so like impactful in that way. It's like you create a sense of self-discipline about it, and even that's a level of shadow work, is to
Right,
create discipline and boundaries with yourself, knowing your quote unquote natural habits.
right. And I would like to point out too, even when you're saying I'm adding weight to myself, it's how you talk to yourself too. And it's maybe not just adding the weight, but it's in your case was, it was so good you couldn't put it down,
Right.
right? There was a control factor to it.
There was a control factor to it, and then there would be like a guilt and shame factor to it, and
Right.
all of
You
that
put
stuff.
that
And then
another layer, right?
right, and then it
There's
just
the
ends up
layer.
being the fucking, reoccurring cycle. So if you can catch yourself in it, right? Exactly. And go, okay, this is hard and it hurts to say, okay, this is where I am sometimes, to admit it, like you said. But that's all that it hurts. Because after that, you go, oh, okay, well, if you're not judging yourself about it, you're just catching it and going, oh, okay, well, fuck. You know,
Right. You got to
I'm gonna
move on.
stop pooping in my own living room, I guess,
You gotta allow yourself to fully let go and to just move and turn and go on, because
Right,
you're never not gonna like remember or forget
right,
or the feeling or the emotion, like that's gonna be there, but the energy of it won't be as strong to where you will
right.
go
You
into it
disassociate
or
from the
find
emotional
yourself,
component.
right? And when you do, then it's just another layer you got to go through of going, okay, as long as you catch yourself in it.
Right. And because then you're not judging yourself, because the only thing that judges you is the ego, because it thinks you have to live by a certain set of standards to remain comfortable and safe and secure, which is its job, to keep you sheltered and fed and not eaten by wild animals and running into things like being run over by cars at
Right.
this point. Like that's literally its technical job. We've just given it so much more power and so much more responsibility in that sense as to its role in our actual life, that's what creates the guilt and the fear around the pain, quote unquote, associated with doing shadow work. All of that's created by that part of you that's built in and supposed to be there, but that's meant to just protect you from being in pain, from being embarrassed, from being hurt, which it translates as emotional pain in most cases, or mental pain, or embarrassment, or whatever. It's translated it to a lot of different things and it's distortion. So that's the shadow work, which is hard in a sense, I guess, to explain that to a 5-year-old.
Right. And well, then that's where you
Right.
would say it's called a cycle, right? Or a
Yeah.
pattern. It's a pattern you follow, right?
Yeah. And you
So if
catch
you
yourself in it.
see yourself, like if you get angry and you go in the pantry and you feel like you need
Mm-hmm.
to have a snack or something, okay, so that's a pattern. You're angry,
Mm-hmm.
so you're going to food. That's something that you could relate to a child, or they
Yeah.
hit or bite. We're not going there, but hey, that's a pattern. Why are you doing that? Oh, well, because so and so, and I feel like I have to get this out. Okay, that's a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your pattern with that work, or what your trigger is? And that's how you go into deeper awareness of, oh, this came back from a childhood memory,
Right.
and then you're connecting it with a family member, and then
Right.
you go back internally of, oh, there it is.
But not judging yourself at any point along that exploratory sojourn is really important, and like the key to it no longer being a cycle, like you being able to actually do the shadow work itself,
Right. It's seeing yourself from a different point
to
of view,
release it, right, to see
and then
yourself on the
coming
other
back.
side. Yeah.
Yeah, and then coming back inwards. It's not like you're leaving it. You're just, okay, if I'm a different person looking out, because that's what you're
Right.
ultimately, you're changing yourself. Shadow work is clearing yourself to like
Right.
remove those patterns and cycles and belief systems, and you're turning into a different awareness of a person.
Right. Through the experience of having done that and seen the results of it, and then deciding whether or not you like it objectively,
Hmm.
without casting judgment on how you got there, because you had to get there somehow to figure out whether or not you liked it.
Yeah.
And so if you're discovering that it's something about yourself that you quote unquote don't like, that's the only thing that makes it shadow.
Yeah.
We were talking about this too. It's like the whole idea of the word occult. The word occult and like black magic has literally nothing to do with black or bad or negative magic or anything. It literally has to do with the fact that it is internal,
Hmm.
energetic magic, and therefore is hidden. And the word occult just meant hidden, like as in you just can't see it.
Right. It's not physical.
Right. It's not physically able to be seen in most cases. So it's like an interesting thing about how the word shadow work has come to mean so many emotional things, and so much like emotional baggage even attached to the idea of doing quote unquote shadow work.
Hmm. Well, yeah, most definitely.
Right. Much like in those other cases, like some of these other works, like Frank and I were talking about, kind of like a little off sides of it, but um chaos magic, the whole idea of like, most Wiccans and things and stuff, and people that I would know that would quote unquote consider themselves spiritual or some other way, you know, like
Mhm.
you say uh chaos magic to them, and they've got generally a lot of already energetic emotional connotation baggage that comes along with that,
Yeah.
whether or not they actually know what the original idea or intent of the idea was.
Right. Yeah. Words have a lot of power in how you
Right.
use them, or in how they've been depicted through time.
Right. And then, but you're holding on, like you said, you're holding on to that belief system about
Hmm.
whatever it is, in this case shadow work. So you're holding on even to a belief system about how shadow work has to go, what
Right.
has to happen, like how much pain you have to go through to do it, so you don't do it, so you stay in pain, so you don't.
Right.
It's like,
Well, yeah. And I think a lot of it, people are in shadow work or say shadow work, and they kind of stay in this depressed, dark place. If I'm
or
doing
that.
shadow work, it's like, it's not meant to be in a dark place to
Mm-mm,
be in a dark place. It's meant to stay
mm-mm.
your dark side, and then, you move through it. Right. All the
Yeah.
inspirational, I'm a light
Yeah,
in
you
a
have to accept
tunnel.
it and go, "Oh, okay, well, here it is," and then just like, is this what I want? And then do something different or do the same
Right. It's the
about
energy
anything.
of things,
Yeah.
not demonic
Right.
or
Right.
depressive. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, yeah. There's so many things, yeah, that it's come to kind of like be associated with and mean that has really nothing to do with the idea of the concept,
Mhm.
with the mechanism of the practices.
It's just clearing old shit.
Yeah, yeah, it's literally clearing old.
That's all I could say.
I wouldn't even say it's just clearing old shit. I think it's shadow work. I mean, you could even technically say it's the perpetual process of deciding what you do and don't like in your reality and doing
Right.
something about it or not.
Mhm.
It could be good or bad. I mean, not bad, but you know what I mean? Like it could be
Yeah.
either side of that spectrum.
Yin and yang.
Yeah. And even that, oh my God. That thing you sent me, I know it's totally offsides and we're on camera, but I didn't give a fuck right now. That thing that you sent me. Okay, the Qigong thing. I watched that, and then there were some further parts on it that he was explaining the whole actual idea of what yin and yang vibrationally represented in that whole original idea. And it's like this whole conversation just reminds me of that talk that he was having about where the idea of yin and yang came from and what it's originally meant to sort of represent versus what it's kind of come to represent in the modern.
Right. I don't think I got
Right.
that far into it, but yeah, he had a lot of amazing things about energetic stuff. And
So good. But it all comes around to the same thing where it's like it's all called the same shit. A rose by any other name is still a rose.
right. Just the process and how it's marketed, let's just say.
Totally. Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah. Oh, we can't even get into that. That'd be way too far off sides for this conversation. But as far as the whole 5-year-old thing, it's like, yeah, I think you nailed it in that sort of second round there, in that sense of,
yeah.
well, I mean, hey, everybody takes you didn't even get a chance to warm up. Like we literally popped on here and was like, all right, pick a topic. Okay. All right, mom, answer. Just give an answer. Okay. Shit. But I think you nailed it in the second round, and we were saying that it's a series of patterns and habits and things that you've come to believe about yourself or the world that shapes how you choose what you choose to do in whatever situation in every moment.
Yeah.
Which then leads to the environment that you find yourself in. So if you're constantly self-checking in a non-judgmental way, but just so constantly self-reflecting in that sense of going, is this what I like? Is this what I like? Yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. You change it if you decide you don't like it. And it doesn't mean that it's bad,
right,
or that it's a bad part of yourself, or that's like an evil part of yourself or anything like that. It's just something that you don't prefer. A trait or something that you've picked up along the way, a pattern or a habit that you just don't prefer.
right.
And then you go, okay, cool, I don't prefer this, so let me do something different. And then the way to do things that will be different will actually come to you sort of in your imagination, and you'll be inspired to do things differently, just as a matter of course, right? As a matter of going along. So there's that. So you don't have to really worry about how you're going to do it differently. Like,
right,
it'll happen for you because you've decided to do it differently.
right. You've made a choice.
But that's as hard as shadow work is. And that's, that's all that it is. But there you go. Right? And on that, right? And on that note, I mean, it's like, and pray. No, but I mean, I think you nailed it in that sense, because it doesn't have to be complicated. I think saying towards the end that it's been marketed to be a lot more complicated, and there's a lot more steps, and you've got to have a process and a program, and you've got to clear it. No.
The clearing is literally is.
All right, well, we're not going to do that anymore. Fuck. All right, moving on. Literally, that's it.
Truly is.
That's literally it.
Truly is.
Swear to God.
Truly is.
Swear to myself, swear to you, the God that you are. I swear to the God that Dallas is and that I am. Everybody is. That's it. So it does not have to be super painful in the sense. It's because you're not judging yourself. Like I said, the only thing judging yourself is your ego.
Yep.
That's the only place where the pain comes from, because it's trying to get you to avoid more pain. So it will give you enough pain so that you avoid the bigger pain, even though there is no, it's fucking cycles, man. We need to put one in there about fear.
Cycles yeah. That's
cycles of fear and how the ego keeps you trapped. That's a good topic.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, we'll probably let y'all go, hey?
Yeah, okay, thanks for stopping by. Shadow work. If you have questions, comments, your experience, we want to hear about it. Drop them in the comments below. Check us out on Anchor and YouTube. Spotify,
Spotify,
and the things.
subscribe, like, share. Thank
That
you.
too. Well, thank you, everyone. Do some shadow work. It's okay. It's safe. Just
Okay.
that's what you're safe. I'm safe. Do it. Blow it. Go. Move.
Nail it.